Buenas tardes a todos. Tengo el gran agrado de presentarles esta hermosa entrevista que ha generado a los jóvenes de nuestra organización, más específicamente el equipo de comunicaciones de la USTA, Unión Tradicionales de Argentina, que han trabajado arduamente en esta entrevista, en la gestión, en la edición, para presentarles algo que puedan entender, trabajar, pensar y ponerlo en acción. Desde ya queremos darle muchas gracias al querido hermano Michael Baden-Powell al acceder a esta entrevista después de mucho tiempo. Hubo mucho trabajo de los jóvenes. En especial quiero agradecer, porque son muy lindos todos los grandes próceres del escautismo, ¿no? Tanto Michael o todo lo que los precedieron, pero quiero agradecer más a dos jóvenes que, bueno, han puesto y trabajado mucho para que esto saliera bien, que es Florencia Suglia, que tradujo al inglés, perteneciente a la agrupación Sagrada, Familia de Lanus, y a Abril, Froy Gómez, del Grupo Scout San Luis Guanella de la Matanza. Desde ya, bueno, los invito, presten atención, dicen muchas cosas que nos va a iluminar un poquito, ¿no? Nos va a iluminar en este camino de que escuchamos tantos maestros, tantas qué opinan, qué dicen, Baden-Powell dijo esto, Baden-Powell dijo lo otro. Le regalamos esto, ¿no? Directo desde la fuente. A disfrutar, hermanos.
Thank you for that. It's a good way to bring scouting together from different parts of the world. And we are, after all brother scouts, aren't we? And I'm delighted to be here and to share this time with you all. And I hope that I'm able to give you some inspiration along the way.
Estoy agradecido de estar acá. Espera que esto sea una inspiración para todos. Que bueno, que el movimiento Scout es un movimiento fraternal y de hermanos, y esto también ayuda a que todos estemos conectados con Scout del mundo, así que está bastante contento por eso.
Buenas tardes, Michael. Antes de comenzar con las preguntas, nos gustaría que nos cuentes algo de tu vida y tu familia.
Firstly, my grandfather was the first Lord Baden-Powell who started scouting throughout the world. And I now am trying to follow in his footsteps. It's a very difficult job because I'm the fourth Lord Baden-Powell. And when my grandfather died, his son, Peter, my father, became the second Lord Baden-Powell, and he continued on with the work. Then, unfortunately, he died, and my older brother, Robert, became the third Lord Baden-Powell, and he continued on his scouting and the scouting work from England. Then at the end, in December last year, unfortunately, my older brother died, and because he and his family, his wife rather, never had family, it meant that the title of Lord Baden-Powell came down to me. So that's why I'm now the fourth Lord Baden-Powell of Gilwell.
That's impressive.
Now, I am in Melbourne. I belong to Scouts Australia, and I'm a commissioner here in Melbourne. And I travel right throughout, not only through Australia and New Zealand, but I also travel extensively overseas to, for example, Hong Kong, Indonesia, all over the place. Thailand, I go to England a lot, or have been going to England a lot. America, I was in America last year for the 24th World Scout Jamboree and met up with many, many old friends. And whilst I was there, the leader of the Argentinian contingent very kindly gave me a contingent scarf, which I've still got tucked away amongst my collection. I didn't wear it today. I didn't think it was appropriate, but I've got my Australian scarf on instead. The thing I've got around my neck, that's this thing, it's called a silver kangaroo. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Right. It is the highest award for scouters in Australia, and that was presented to me a number of years ago by the Governor General of Australia. And the Governor General is like represents Her Majesty the Queen Elizabeth here in Australia. So basically that's where I fit in and where I am now. And as I said to you earlier, I try to go to as many scouting functions as I can right around the world. I am a Baden-Powell fellow, and I do all sorts of weird things there. So that really gives you a little bit of background as to where I am and who I am, and so on.
Bueno, primero les quiero contar dónde encajo yo en todo esto y qué es lo que hago acá. Mi abuelo fue el primer Lord Baden-Powell, él empezó el movimiento Scout en el mundo. Yo estoy tratando de seguir sus huellas, es un trabajo muy difícil. Yo soy el cuarto Lord Baden-Powell. Cuando mi abuelo falleció, su hijo Peter, que fue mi papá, fue el segundo Lord y él continuó su trabajo. Cuando mi papá murió, mi hermano mayor Robert se convirtió en el tercer Lord y continuó haciendo el trabajo en Inglaterra. Desgraciadamente, en diciembre pasado, mi hermano falleció y como él no tuvo hijos, el título nobiliario pasó a mí. Por eso yo soy el cuarto Lord Baden-Powell de Hillwell. Ahora estoy en Melbourne, pertenezco a Scouts Australia, que es la Asociación de Scouts de Australia. Viajo mucho por Australia y Nueva Zelanda, pero también lo hago extensamente a otras partes. Por ejemplo, Hong Kong, Tailandia, Indonesia, todo tipo de lugares. También voy mucho para Inglaterra. El año pasado estuve en América para el 24º Jamboree, me reencontré con viejos amigos y también me encontré con el líder de la comitiva argentina. Él me regaló un pañuelo que ahora forma parte de mi colección. No lo estoy usando ahora en este momento porque no me pareció apropiado. El que tengo puesto ahora es mi pañuelo australiano. Junto con el pañuelo tengo un canguro plateado. ¿Lo pueden ver? Es el reconocimiento más alto para los scouts australianos. Y me lo dieron hace unos años. Me lo dio un magistrado que representa a la reina Elizabeth en Australia. Esto es básicamente un poco sobre lo que hago y como dije antes trato de estar en todos los lugares que pueda haciendo lo que sea. También tengo 3 hijos, de los cuales 2 están casados, tengo 5 nietos y 4 nietas, y un bisnieto. A él lo invistieron hace unos 2 meses. Y tengo una de mis nietas que trabaja en el movimiento de las guías. Esto les da un poco de contexto sobre quién es Michael, de dónde viene y cómo es su familia.
Michael, ser descendiente de Baden-Powell, ¿ha sido en su vida el curso que la marcó?
I really don't know how to answer that. What is it like being Abril in Argentina? See, I don't know. All I know is who I am, and I do my best to extend good wishes and encouragement to scouts all over the world. So I don't really know whether it has decided my life or not. It's certainly played a big influence because people I meet scouting and girl guiding people I meet, they all want to come and talk with me, and I suppose they think they're going to get some kind of inspiration. I don't really know. So to answer you, Abril, I don't really know.
Realmente no sé cómo responder eso. ¿Qué se siente ser vos? No lo sé. Todo lo que sé es quién soy, y hago lo mejor que puedo. Extiendo buenos deseos y aliento a los scouts de todo el mundo. Así que realmente no sé si he decidido mi vida o no. Significo yo una gran influencia, porque la gente, los scouts en los encuentros, quieren todos venir a hablar conmigo. Supongo que obtendrán alguna clase de inspiración. Así que la respuesta es, realmente no lo sé.
Michael, ¿cuál es su opinión personal sobre el trabajo y la vida de Baden-Powell?
Well, he was an extraordinary person because his background was a military background. He was a very senior officer in the British Army in his time, used to active service at the time, which was, what, 100 years ago. And yet what is so extraordinary, he started what is arguably the greatest peace movement in the world. In fact, the world has ever seen, which is true. And I don't know whether any of you have been on any big international gatherings, like jamborees, for example. I've been to many, and it is quite extraordinary to see how people of different countries, different religions, different beliefs, somehow are able to come together as one unit. It is quite extraordinary. In the days when, for example, in the days when South Africa sadly had their policy of what became known as separate development, I saw scouts with dark skin and white skin joining together quite happily. In the Middle Eastern countries around Jordan and those countries, where sadly there is still a lot of discontent amongst differing people, Afghanistan particularly. I have seen people from those countries mix quite happily with their fellow scouts, not of the same belief, from other parts of the world, join together quite happily. So there is no doubt BP himself was a mover and a shaker of peoples of the world. And to prove that point, you have only got to look at the numbers of members in World Scouting, which are 50 million or thereabouts throughout the world. Now, the question is, how did this all happen? Well, it happened because Scouting knows no political frontiers. It knows no religious frontiers either. To all of us people living in all different parts of the world, we only know friendship. We only know trust of one another. And I think this is the reason why, or a reason why, Scouting has spread so quickly as it has done. I mean, 50 million people in uniforms of all descriptions says a great deal of my grandfather and what he did and what he is, in a way, still doing. It's pretty remarkable, and it's with a great deal of pride that I try in my own limited way to continue on with his work. That's what I'm trying to do now. And when Diego kindly invited me to sit with you for these few moments to talk with you about experiences, scouting, and so on, and the principles, that's why I thought, yes, this is a good way to put our hands across the sea and join together in friendship.
Mi abuelo fue un hombre extraordinario. Tuvo un trasfondo militar. Fue un oficial importante en la Armada Británica. Lo que lo hizo extraordinario fue que dio inicio al mayor movimiento de paz que el mundo haya visto. No sé si alguno de ustedes ha estado en algún jamboree. Yo he estado en muchos y es extraordinario ver cómo personas de diferentes países, religiones y creencias de algún modo pueden juntarse en un mismo lugar. En los días en que, por ejemplo, Sudáfrica sufrió segregación racial, he visto scouts de diferentes culturas disfrutar juntos, a pesar que hoy en día esos lugares sigan teniendo este tipo de conflictos. Sin duda, BP intentó romper esas fronteras que el escultismo no conoce, sin importar religión o creencias. Solo sabemos de amistad y de compañerismo. Por eso, el movimiento creció tan rápido y somos 50 millones de scouts uniformados. Algo que mi abuelo logró y yo estoy intentando continuar. Por eso, como Diego me invitó tan amablemente a compartir un momento con ustedes, me pareció genial poder cruzar el océano para charlar fraternalmente.
Michael, ¿cómo ves el movimiento Scout hoy?
Well, I see the scouting principle as the great hope for the world. Sadly, there are the politicians of the world seem to be intent on pulling each other to pieces. And none of them seem to be able to understand how to sit down and talk out their differences over a cup of tea or coffee or whatever it is that they're drinking. But they're all grandstanding. And I think that's very sad. And this is the big advantage of the scouting principles, in the sense that whilst we don't speak the same language in that sense, I mean, you're speaking Spanish. Unfortunately, I don't speak Spanish. I don't understand it. I only speak English. Nevertheless, our scout training is exactly the same. And I see great hope if we can talk with enough politicians and educate them enough. Hopefully, one day, the penny might drop. We hope that to be the case. So I see scouting as, and the principles of scouting, as probably greater now in terms of need, greater now than they've ever been in the last 100 years.
Los principios son esperanzadores. Desgraciadamente, los políticos hoy en día no saben resolver sus diferencias tomando un té o un café o cualquier bebida de por medio. Esa me parece una ventaja por el movimiento, por nuestra capacidad de unirnos como hermanos, a pesar de nuestras diferencias. A pesar de no hablar el mismo idioma, nuestro entrenamiento Scout es el mismo. Si educáramos a nuestros políticos en nuestros principios, podríamos cerrar grietas y eso nos impulsaría a seguir.
¿Tradición o modernidad?
I think modern. We've got to. We have a phrase here in Australia: is youth-led, supervised by adults. In other words, in the past, scouting in English-speaking countries tended to be led by scouters, thinking what they believed the young scouts of today should learn and practice. This is all over the world. That is all changing. And hence I used the word youth-led. In other words, the tendency now in most English-speaking countries is we should listen to what our young people are telling us. They have a language entirely on their own. I sit down with my grandchildren and I listen to what they're saying and what is of interest to them. So when I go to speak with a group anywhere in Australia or New Zealand or wherever, England particularly, I always listen to what the children are saying. Now, the facts are that the children might not be particularly interested in having a history lesson. You know, BP was a great chap, he did this and he did that. That's not of interest to young people today. What is of interest to people, young people today, is how can I make my life better and help other people? As I say in the Scout law, a Scout is a brother to all, no matter what country, class or creed the other may belong. Scouts of today really take that part of the Scout law to heart and try to practice it in their own particular way, which is pretty important.
Pienso que modernidad. Tenemos una frase aquí en Australia que dice liderazgo joven supervisado por adultos. En otras palabras, en el pasado el escultismo en países angloparlantes tendía a ser liderado por scouters, de quienes creo que los scouters de hoy deberían aprender y practicar. Esto es en todo el mundo, todo está cambiando. Uso las palabras liderazgo joven, ya que debemos tomarnos la tendencia de escuchar lo que nuestros jóvenes nos dicen. Ellos tienen un lenguaje totalmente suyo. Me siento con mis nietos y escucho lo que están diciendo y qué es de interés para ellos. Así que cuando voy a hablar a un grupo, ya sea en Australia, Nueva Zelanda o en donde sea, particularmente en Inglaterra, siempre escucho lo que los niños hablan. Ahora bien, el niño no está interesado en tener una lección de historia, que BP hizo esto o hizo lo otro. Ese no es el interés de los jóvenes de hoy. Lo que sí les interesa es cómo puedo mejorar mi vida y ayudar a las otras personas. Como está dicho en la ley Scout, un Scout es un hermano para todos, sin importar el país, clase o credo a la que pertenezcan. Los Scouts hoy toman esa parte de la ley Scout con el corazón y tratan de practicarla cada uno a su manera, lo cual es muy importante.
¿Baden-Powell estuvo involucrado en la masonería?
No, this is very strange. Whilst he was an officer in the British Army, many of his friends were Freemasons. His brother officers, I should say, were Freemasons. His younger brother Baden was a member of a military Freemasons lodge in the UK. And I am a Freemason, and I've been a Freemason for a few years anyway now. And I break the rules. I broke the rule. So the short shall answer your question, Maria. No, there was no relationship between BP and Freemasonry. And yet, strangely, there are 5 Baden-Powell lodges in the world, one of which is in Argentina, which is very good. And I heard from, I can't think of his name for the moment, only last week, doing what we're doing now. So obviously whilst he was not a Freemason, what is interesting is that he actually wrote each lodge in Australia and in Britain. I don't know about other countries. Each lodge, Freemasons lodge, has a large copy of the Holy Bible. You know the Bible? And on the inside leaf of the one that's in our lodge, which is Baden-Powell's lodge, he wrote in it, I can't remember the exact words now, but it was along the lines that he congratulated the people, the Scouters, who had started that particular lodge off nearly 90 years ago, started that lodge off. He congratulated them for their foresight and wished them well wished them and their successors well in their future, as far as Freemasonry is concerned and as far as their own scouting work was concerned. And my lodge still has that particular Holy Bible, and they still have that particular phrase. Well, they've got to have it because it's actually written in, and grandfather actually wrote in it with his own hand.
No, y es muy extraño, ya que muchos de sus compañeros lo eran. Incluso su hermano menor participaba en una logia. Yo soy masón también, hace ya varios años, pero no hay relación entre VIP y la masonería. Curiosamente, hay unas 5 logias en el mundo que llevan el nombre de Baden-Powell y una está en Argentina, lo que me parece genial. Otra cosa curiosa es que las logias con su nombre, al menos las que yo conozco, tienen una copia de la Biblia, y en la Biblia de la logia a la que pertenezco, él escribió unas palabras donde los felicita por el esfuerzo y les desea éxitos.
¿Crees que en el futuro el movimiento Scout perdería validez entre los jóvenes?
I don't think so. Going on the last World Jamboree we had in the United States only last year, what was interesting was that jamboree, big although it was, certainly did not lack in numbers. I don't know how many scouts, and I include adults as well, were there, but I heard a figure of 50,000 or thereabouts. It may have been more, it may have been less, I don't really know. But it was certainly an increase in numbers over the jamboree before, which was in Japan. And that would indicate to me that more young people are taking to Scouts and what Scout training offers young people, the opportunities. They're accepting that and they're going along that path. And there are many great people. There are many people in the world who owe their success to what they learned in the Scouts. For example, I don't remember how many astronauts there are, but there are 14 odd astronauts, most of whom have gone up into the sky by rocket and have done whatever it is that they've done. The point that I'm driving at is that out of all the number, the first man on the moon, for example, Neil Armstrong, was an Eagle Scout. I look in the British hierarchy and I see all the people who have served in Parliament, in the armed services, and people who have served and done well in industry, and they've all owe their success to what they learned in Scouting. So the short answer is, I believe that Scouting and its principles have a great deal to offer in the development of young people, and that is why I think those two factors, that is why I think Scouting will be more relevant in future years than what it is now. And to have grown from 21 young people in Brownsea Island in 1900, and to have grown to something like 50 million in just over 100 years, we've got to be doing something right.
No lo creo. De hecho, en el Jamboree del año pasado en Estados Unidos noté un incremento de jóvenes y adultos con respecto al anterior, que fue en Japón. Recuerdo quizás unas 50.000 personas entre jóvenes y adultos. No estoy muy seguro. Eso me indica que mucha gente joven acepta lo que el escultismo tiene para ofrecerles, lo que el entrenamiento de Scout tiene para ofrecerles y las oportunidades que genera. Hay mucha gente en el mundo que debe su éxito al escultismo o lo que aprendieron en él. Por ejemplo, muchos astronautas, Neil Armstrong, el primer hombre que pisó la luna, fue un Eagle Scout, por ejemplo. Y veo esto mucho también en la jerarquía británica. Muchos miembros del Parlamento, de la milicia o de algunas industrias deben su éxito al escultismo. Por lo que, en resumen, mi respuesta es que el escautismo y sus principios tienen mucho que ofrecer todavía al desarrollo de los jóvenes y va a ser aún más necesario o relevante en el futuro. Pienso siempre en los 21 muchachos que estuvieron en la isla de Brownsea y después de 100 años se convirtieron en 50 millones, así que algo bien debemos estar haciendo.
¿Cuál es tu momento más feliz en los Scouts?
Oh, there have been many of them. I think my happiest moment is if I happen to be at some Scout gathering somewhere in the world and I see the smiling faces of people associated with Scouting. That is the happiest moment. It can be very busy sometimes. For example, in America, there were 50,000 Scouts attending, I believe, and it felt as though I had had my photograph taken and I'd signed 50,000 signatures. That's what it felt like. I don't think it was quite that many, but it makes me happy to be able to look at a person, a young person or a person in the eye and smile at them, and for them to smile back at me. That is the happiest time.
Hay muchos de ellos. Pienso que mi momento más feliz es cuando, si estoy en algún encuentro scout en algún lugar del mundo y veo las caras sonrientes de las personas scouts, ese es un momento bastante feliz. Puede ser muy ocupante algunas veces. Por ejemplo, en Estados Unidos habían 50.000 scouts presentes, creo. Y cuando llegó el momento de sacarnos fotos, me sentí luego como si hubiera firmado 50.000 de ellas. No creo que hayan sido tantos, pero me hace feliz ser capaz de mirar a un joven a los ojos, sonreírle y que esa persona lo haga de vuelta. Ese es un momento feliz.
¿Qué cambiarías en los Scouts actuales?
I don't think there's any need for us to change anything in Scouting because it's dateless in the sense that the principles of Scouting have been around for over 100 years, and there's no reason why that principle should ever be lost. And I believe very firmly that there is a lot of truth and wisdom in that famous book that grandfather wrote called Scouting for Boys. And I think if we, as Scouters, all continue on in our own respective way to follow those principles, I believe there's a great future in the movement. The talk of taking young people camping and teaching them various skills in various participations, I think that is very, very important. The point is that we are committed, all of us are committed to benefit young people and people generally to lead more useful lives to themselves, to their to the people and areas and population where they live, work and play. That is important. And I think as long as we continue on to remember the young people that are coming along after us, I believe that the movement will grow and continue to grow in a much more beneficial way. I would very much like to see, when you think about it, you think of all the different countries in the world. There are many of them, but there are only 6 countries in the world that I know of that are not members of the World Scout Organization. Only 6 out of the hundreds of countries that there are. And I believe that it is only a question of time before we'll bring some of those 6 countries into the scouting family, and that'll be tremendous if we can do that. It's gradually happening. When I was last in Hong Kong, they have a commissioner or a scouter that used to then, and I'm going back a few years ago, his commissionership enabled him to cross the then border from Hong Kong into China, and his job was to start the scouting movement again in China, and he started off obviously in towns and cities not far away from Hong Kong then, and I'm going back maybe 7 or 8 years ago, maybe 10 years ago. And I sat down with him over dinner one night whilst I was in Hong Kong, and I listened very carefully to what he was saying. And he was saying, it won't happen overnight, but bit by bit, Scouting for Boys is starting to make some headway in China. Now that was then. Now, whether that's the case now or not, I don't know. Unfortunately, I've lost contact with that particular person. So the short chop answer to your question is, it is my personal belief, based on the facts as I understand them and as I know them to be, Scouting has a great future and will continue to go on long after I'm 6 foot under the ground.
Creo que no hay una verdadera necesidad de que cambiemos nada, ya que el movimiento es atemporal. Contamos con unos principios que estuvieron funcionando durante cientos de años. Creo firmemente que hay mucha sabiduría y verdad en el libro que escribió mi abuelo, Escultismo para Muchachos, y si todos lo siguiéramos, hay un gran futuro para el movimiento. Hay solo 6 países que no forman parte de la Orden Scout Mundial, y cuando fui a Hong Kong hace unos 10 años aproximadamente, escuché a un scouter que quería volver a hacer funcionar el movimiento en China, decir que no iba a suceder de la noche a la mañana, pero aún así que iba a poder lograrse. Básicamente, siguiendo los principios, veo un gran futuro y no hay nada que modificar.
En tu opinión, ¿cómo debería ser un buen líder scout?
To be able to listen to young people and understand what that young person is talking about and what's going on in their mind. Remember what I said 5 minutes ago. Adult supported, youth led. And I'm a firm believer in that.
Que sea capaz de escuchar a los jóvenes, que entienda lo que ellos quieren decir y todo lo que pasa por sus mentes. Como dije antes, los adultos apoyan y la juventud guía. Soy un firme creyente de esto.
Michael, ¿qué opinas de las últimas noticias sobre Baden-Powell?
I don't take any notice of it.
Could you repeat, please?
BP's actions and his name has stood well with the rest of the world for over 100 years. And that kind of talk is from an uninformed source who really do not know any better or have any better understanding. I think what we've got to do, and that really answers your question, Abril. So I don't really take a lot of notice of all that. I understand from the UK scouts or my contacts there that they did not remove the statue. Instead, they boarded it up, but then so did they board up the statue of Winston Churchill just outside the British Houses of Parliament. It's all unboarded now, I understand. So I take very little notice of people of that persuasion. To me, what is important is he was a senior British officer in the British Army who did his duties as he saw fit at that time. Yet he developed what is arguably the world's greatest peace movement. And that's the facts. So I don't really take a lot of notice of these idle threats and this idle chatter that I hear about. Our important role in life is to support our young people and to attempt to get them to or lead them into a better way of life that will give them some sort of opportunity to lead more useful lives to themselves, to their parents, their employers, and indeed to the community in which they live, work, and play. That's the bottom line.
No hago caso de eso. La excelencia de BP y su nombre siempre han sido bien vistos por el mundo, por alrededor de 100 años. Esta clase de habladurías proviene de una fuente desinformada, que realmente no sabe nada ni tiene ningún conocimiento. No debemos hacerle caso. Entiendo por mis contactos en Reino Unido que no removieron la estatua. En cambio, ahora rodearon la estatua de Winston Churchill, justo afuera de la plaza del Parlamento británico. Así que hago poco caso de ello. Para mí lo que es importante es que él era un oficial mayor inglés del ejército británico, que ofreció su servicio en el momento y desarrolló lo que extensamente se cree hoy como el movimiento de paz más grande del mundo. Esos son hechos, no hago caso de las amenazas. Nuestro rol importante en la vida es apoyar a los jóvenes, intentar introducirlos a una mejor forma de vida, darles la oportunidad de vivir vidas más útiles para ellos mismos, para sus padres, para sus empleados y para la comunidad en la que viven, trabajan y juegan.
¿Qué tipo de trabajo estás haciendo activamente en el movimiento Scout?
Oh, that's how long is a piece of string? You know, I seem to be spending most of my time these days, now that I'm no longer running a business, I seem to be spending most of my time in going around Australia, particularly because I live here, encouraging young scouts and older scouts to continue with their participation and gain something that's of use to them and their community. And that is the main work that I do here. I'm not paid for it. If I've got to go to Queensland or Sydney, New South Wales, or if I've got to jump on a plane and go to Hong Kong, then I do so, and I do so quite willingly. I don't get paid for doing this, and I don't want to get paid for doing it. I do it because I know the end result is all going to be worth it in the end. It's as simple as that. I actually was, I ran a business up to about 20 or 25 years ago, and I was given an offer too good to say no to, and I got out of that business and I went to India instead and thoroughly enjoyed meeting Indians, in India that is. It was great, and I haven't stopped traveling since then. I was in, after the World Jamboree in America, the 24th World Jamboree, I flew to the UK to attend the 100th anniversary of Gilwell Park in England. It was terrific. Oh, great. And I was able to meet up with so many old friends in the UK.
Hoy en día, ya que no me ocupo de mi negocio, paso mis días recorriendo Australia mayormente, que es donde vivo, alentando a los scouts a seguir trabajando, y si tengo que tomar un avión hasta Hong Kong para hacerlo, lo haré. No me pagan por eso, ni quiero que lo hagan, porque sé que al final todo vale la pena. Hace unos 20 años me hicieron una oferta muy buena, así que me hice a un lado de mi negocio y viajé a la India a conocer scouts de allá. Y desde entonces no paré. El año pasado, después del Jamboree en América, fui a Gran Bretaña para asistir al aniversario número 100 del parque de Gilwell y fue increíble.
Michael, ¿cómo la estás pasando?
I'm trying to answer you all in the best way I can, and I'm enjoying enormously. Well, thank heavens for COVID-19, because if it wasn't for COVID-19, we wouldn't be enjoying modern day the opportunities that modern day technology is able to let us use. And we wouldn't be meeting and talking now if it wasn't for COVID. So thank heavens for COVID, in that sense.
Bueno, aquí le pregunté cómo se sentía, si estaba cansado, y dijo que en absoluto, que estaba disfrutando muchísimo. Y incluso destacó que si no fuera por la cuarentena y la tecnología no estaríamos teniendo esta maravillosa charla.
Michael, para ir finalizando, ¿cómo estás haciendo ahora con la cuarentena? ¿Cómo te estás cuidando?
Probably much the same as you are. In Australia, we have certain very strict restrictions in the sense that the problem is that there is no vaccine anywhere. We know that there's a lot of experimentation going on, but that's going to take maybe years to develop a vaccine. So therefore, we've got, because we're dealing with an enemy that is unseen, it's wandering around, we don't know what it looks like. All we know is that if you only got to get a bit of saliva on your hand, for example, I understand the results can be very devastating. So we've got these very strict restrictions in Australia, where we've got to keep each other, we call it social distancing, and at times, when it first came out, we were all laughing about it, but we're not laughing anymore because we understand why. That we've got to keep 1.5 meters away from the person that you're speaking with, which is very sad. So the short chop answer is yes. We've got very strict restrictions. If we go into a shop to buy food, for example, as we walk in now, we've got to wipe this stuff on our hands. It's supposed to make our hands clean. And if we pick up a packet of something or another and put it in the shopping basket, when we get home, we've got to wash our hands. So lots of hand washing, lots of social distancing from our neighbours, which is very sad. That's the way it is. So yes, we've got some very strict restrictions here, and it seems to have seems to be working in the sense that the people in Australia generally who are diagnosed with the coronavirus seems to be far less than many other countries in the world, particularly, yes, which is very important. The number of deaths that we've had in this country appear to be under control, well under control. And I'm not talking about, I'm talking about maybe 100 or so people at the very most. Now, we're a nation of, some 15 million, something of that nature, but tiny proportion of that, we are people who've been diagnosed with the virus. So obviously the restrictive practices that our government has, under medical advice, have introduced are working or appear to be working. And it's just jolly nuisance that we can't go to a restaurant, ring up our friends and say, let's go out and have to XYZ and have dinner for tonight. We can't do that, sadly, not yet. We hope that that won't be too long before we'll be able to do that. So that, Maria, is how we're coping with the current coronavirus.
En adición, aquí le pregunté a Michael cómo estaba llevando la situación de pandemia y cuarentena, a lo que respondió que se encuentra en la misma situación en la que nos encontramos los argentinos. En Australia seguimos cumpliendo con las estrictas restricciones. Sabemos que hay muchas investigaciones llevándose a cabo, pero descubrir el virus en su totalidad podría tomar incluso años. Estamos luchando contra un enemigo invisible. Aquí mantenemos el aislamiento social. Lastimosamente no podemos cenar junto a nuestros amigos fuera y ese tipo de cosas por el momento. Al principio nos reíamos, pero ahora no lo hacemos más. Estar a 2 metros de la persona con la que estás conversando es muy triste. Además, todo el tiempo debemos mantener nuestras manos limpias, utilizar alcohol en gel, etc. Todas estas medidas que ha ido tomando nuestro gobierno, obviamente bajo las recomendaciones del sector de salud, parecen funcionar. Sobre todo en el sentido de que no estamos tan mal en comparación a otros países, y a pesar de que no tenemos pocas muertes, podría decirse que la situación en sí está en cierto modo bajo control.
Muchas gracias, Michael, por esta posibilidad.
Well, it's been really wonderful having this opportunity for us to meet and to talk and to thank the COVID virus and modern technology for making this possible. And Diego, can I just thank you for your patience and the manner in which you've contacted me in the way that you have. I do appreciate your efforts a great deal. Thank you.
Fue genial tener esta oportunidad para reunirnos y charlar. Hay que agradecer al coronavirus y a las maravillas de la tecnología. Agradezco especialmente a Diego por su paciencia y la manera en la que se contactó conmigo. Gracias.
Bueno, querido hermano Michael, te damos gracias desde ya por esta muy buena entrevista, por ilustrarnos y bueno, por marcar un norte para que podamos seguir trabajando. Desde ya, desde USTA, mil gracias.
Okay, I will leave you all. Good scouting, good camping, and above all, be happy in what you're doing. Thank you very much. Arrivederci.
Gracias. Por ahora los dejo. Buen servicio, buena acampada y por sobre todo sean felices con lo que hagan. Muchas gracias.
Espero que hayan disfrutado de esta entrevista tanto como la disfruté yo. Como habrán visto, hubo muchos conceptos y muchas ideas para poder trabajar, ¿no? Y lo que he sacado el concepto claro que hay, tanto como Baden-Powell como sus descendientes tienen la idea de la universalidad, luego de que es el movimiento Scout. Así que bueno, nosotros como ejemplo tenemos que trabajar todo eso, ¿no? Para las futuras generaciones que nos preceden, ¿no? La unidad y la hermandad, sin diferencia de asociación, pañuelo, nacionalidad, religión o la forma que eligió para amar. Desde ya muchas gracias. Gracias nuevamente a Florencia y Abril por su gran trabajo. No se pierdan futuros eventos que vamos a realizar. Desde ya, muchas gracias.